Supreme Court shreds federal immunity in major 9-0 ruling. Imagine federal agents raiding your home in the middle of the night, only to find out they got the wrong address. No charges, no apology. And then they argue you have no right to sue. That's exactly what happened in Georgia, and the Supreme Court just issued a unanimous decision that could permanently shift how gun owners and all Americans hold the federal government accountable. This isn't just about one mistake. It's about the future of qualified immunity, wrongful raids, and whether the government can continue operating above the law. In this video, we break it all down. What actually happened in the Martin v. United States case, how the FBI's use of a personal GPS led to a shocking raid, what the Supreme Court's 9-0 decision changes about immunity laws, how this could protect law-abiding gun owners nationwide, what the DOJ is doing right now to slow down accountability. Welcome to Firearms Law Advisor. No spin, no politics, just the legal truth shaping your rights. Subscribe now to stay ahead of every fight. The wrong door, the right to sue. It started in 2017. The FBI launched a pre-dawn raid targeting alleged gang members in suburban Atlanta. But they didn't hit their target. They hit an innocent family's home instead. No one inside had any criminal record. And yet, flashbangs exploded, doors were smashed, and terrified civilians were dragged out at gunpoint. When the family tried to sue, the federal government argued they were immune. The question reached the Supreme Court. Can citizens sue the federal government for mistakes this serious? Key takeaways. The FBI raided the home of Katrina Martin by mistake in 2017. The agents used a personal GPS instead of official navigation tools. The family filed a lawsuit under the Federal Tort Claims Act, FTCA. The government argued it was protected by immunity exceptions under FTCA. This wasn't just about one raid. The federal government was attempting to set precedent that no matter how reckless the mistake, they could never be held liable. But the Supreme Court saw it differently. How the FBI got it wrong. Special Agent Lawrence Guerrera was leading the operation. His team was supposed to storm a specific home linked to gang activity, but instead of verifying the location through official protocol, he used his phone's GPS. That simple mistake sent agents to the wrong address, a quiet family home where no crime had occurred. The scene quickly spiraled into a full-blown armed raid. Key takeaways. Guerrera entered the address into his phone's GPS, not agency software. The navigation error led the team to Katrina Martin's home. Her boyfriend and 7-year-old child were inside at the time of the raid. Agents used flashbangs, detained all three, and only realized the mistake after seeing mail with the correct address. This wasn't a small error. It was a tactical failure that exposed innocent Americans to force, trauma, and unlawful detention. And it begged the question, when government agents mess up like this, who answers for it? The FTCA Loopholes. The family sued under the FTCA, a rare legal path that allows people to hold the federal government liable for its employees' actions. But the government claimed two carve-outs: the intentional tort and discretionary function exceptions. According to the DOJ, even a mistaken raid using bad judgment still didn't qualify for a lawsuit. Key takeaways. The FTCA permits limited lawsuits against the federal government. Two key exceptions were used to try and block the lawsuit. Intentional tort protects agents from claims like assault or false arrest. Discretionary function shields poor judgment or bad decisions made during official duties. This is where the case became a constitutional battle. If these exceptions stood, it would allow federal agents to avoid responsibility in almost every wrongful raid. But the Supreme Court wasn't willing to give that kind of blanket immunity. Supreme Court steps in. After the lower courts sided with the government, the family petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court, and in a rare and powerful move, the justices issued a 9-0 ruling. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the unanimous opinion that tore apart the 11th Circuit's interpretation and reopened the door to federal accountability. The FBI, they ruled, may not be immune in this case after all. Key takeaways. The Supreme Court granted review and issued a unanimous 9-0 ruling. Justice Gorsuch authored the decision rejecting the 11th Circuit's stance. The court held that the exceptions were misapplied in this context. The case was sent back down for re-review under the correct interpretation. This was more than a procedural fix. It was a warning shot, one that put every federal agency on notice. They cannot rely on overbroad immunity when lives, homes, and rights are at stake. What happens next? Now that the Supreme Court has remanded the case, the DOJ has been ordered to file a new response. They requested an extension, citing the government shutdown, but they can only delay for so long. The 11th Circuit must now decide the case with the Supreme Court's guidance in place. Key takeaways. The DOJ must file a supplemental brief by November 21, 2025. The 11th Circuit will re-review the case based on the new SCOTUS ruling. The federal government is seeking more time, but cannot escape relitigation. This case could reshape future lawsuits involving mistaken raids, and here's why this matters for gun owners, self-defense advocates, and constitutional watchdogs. It sets a clearer path to sue the government when rights are violated even inside your own home. That's a game-changing shift in accountability. The Bruen Effect. Though this case was not about firearms directly, it sets a critical precedent that could influence ongoing Second Amendment battles. Bruen established a historical test for modern gun laws. Martin builds on that by reinforcing that government agencies cannot use vague policy to override individual rights. Bruen limits state power by requiring a historical justification for gun restrictions. Martin limits federal immunity by rejecting vague policy shields. Together, they form a stronger constitutional framework for defending 2A rights. Future lawsuits may cite both cases to attack unjust enforcement actions. This ruling strengthens a broader legal trend. The courts are increasingly unwilling to let the government claim immunity when its actions violate individual liberty, especially when it comes to constitutional rights like the Second Amendment. Pressure on federal agencies. Federal agencies have long used policy discretion to justify raids, seizures, and investigations. The Martin ruling now forces those agencies to operate with more caution. No longer can they rely on what we thought was legal as a shield against accountability. ATF raids involving firearm seizures could now face increased legal challenges. FBI search warrants must meet higher standards or face potential lawsuits. Mistaken identity or bad intel will no longer guarantee legal protection. Agencies must reassess their use of force and search protocols. This could trigger a wave of internal reviews at federal agencies. The fear of being sued and losing will change how operations are planned. It could also shift how gun owners are treated in controversial cases, especially where no charges are filed. More lawsuits coming. This decision does not mean the federal government is now open season, but it does create a new, narrower path for legitimate lawsuits, and for the first time in years, plaintiffs have a chance to win. For civil liberties groups and wrongly accused citizens, that is a huge step forward. Not every case will succeed, but more will now survive early dismissal. Victims of wrongful federal action have a new legal avenue. Courts may now look more closely at facts instead of deferring to agency claims. The chilling effect on reckless enforcement may deter future abuse. We're likely to see an uptick in FTCA lawsuits, especially from people who were harmed by mistaken raids or overzealous enforcement. The playing field just shifted in favor of individual rights, and the government knows it. Legal experts react. Legal scholars are already dissecting Martin for what it could mean long-term. Some say it narrows government immunity too much. Others say it doesn't go far enough. But what they agree on is this: it redefines how courts must analyze claims of federal discretion. Some experts warn of a wave of costly litigation against the government. Others argue this brings much-needed balance to civil rights enforcement. Constitutional law professors say this restores judicial oversight over abuse. Government attorneys are reviewing internal policies to limit liability exposure. Whether you're a legal scholar or gun owner, one thing is clear: the days of unchecked federal immunity are ending. And this ruling could become a legal foundation in future battles over everything from red flag raids to property confiscation. What happens next? The Martin decision is already being cited in new cases. Lower courts will now have to revisit how they apply the FTCA exception. That ripple effect could extend to high-profile gun rights lawsuits, especially those involving wrongful raids or confiscations. Watch for Martin being cited in new 2A and civil rights lawsuits. Expect agencies to update protocols to avoid triggering liability. Future gun cases may invoke Martin to challenge federal overreach. Congress may even respond with legislative attempts to retighten immunity. This is why gun owners and legal advocates must stay informed. What happened in Martin versus the United States isn't just a legal win, it is a shift in how the system works. And in today's environment, every inch of regained ground matters. The fight is far from over, but this time, liberty won. For too long, the federal government has used its own rules to justify breaking yours. But this time, the Supreme Court drew a line. Martin versus United States is more than just a 9-0 ruling. It is a signal that accountability is coming back and that no agency is above the Constitution. As gun owners, liberty advocates, and citizens who believe in limits on government power, this case gives us a new tool, one that reminds Washington that when they kick in the wrong door, there are consequences. We'll keep tracking how this ruling unfolds and what it means for future Second Amendment cases and federal overreach. If you found this breakdown helpful, subscribe to Firearms Law Advisor for real legal insight, not headlines. Like this video to push it to others who need to know the truth, and let the government know we're watching. The law's changing, and this time, it's on your side.